Welcome back to Behind the Scams, the only podcast where uncovering fraud is just another day at the office. A very weird, frustrating office. I'm Miles, your smooth-talking tour guide to the land of deception, where the only thing thinner than a scammer's morals is their excuse for stealing your money. Today's episode is a doozy. Nick and Sue have the unbelievable story of an 80-something-year-old priest who was targeted by a ruthless PayPal imposter scam. Yes, you heard that right. A priest. These scammers are hitting rock bottom with this one. You'll hear the actual details of how they nearly conned him out of thousands, how the victim thought he was saving his account, when in reality, he was walking right into a fraudster's trap, and how Nick and Sue break down the tactics these fake PayPal agents use to fool even the savviest among us. Think it couldn't happen to you? That's exactly what these scammers want you to believe. So buckle up, lean in, and prepare to be both horrified and thoroughly disgusted with the lengths that scammers will go to steal your hard-earned money. Nick, Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Miles. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Scams. I'm your host, Nick, and as always, I'm joined by my wife and co-host, Sue.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you all again.
Today, we're diving into something that's becoming increasingly common: PayPal imposter scams. These are particularly dangerous because they target a platform that millions of us use regularly for online purchases and transfers.
Oh, I know so many of our friends use PayPal. It's scary to think scammers are exploiting that trust.
Exactly. And what makes today's story especially heartbreaking is that our victim is an 80-something retired priest who's spent his entire life serving others.
Wait, they targeted a priest? That's just wow.
Unfortunately, scammers don't discriminate when it comes to their targets. They'll go after anyone, including those who've dedicated their lives to helping others.
I'm already feeling upset about this one. So what happened to this priest?
Well, we're about to find out how one alarming email led to this man losing his entire life savings, and the remarkable way his community responded. So, I want to introduce you to our victim in today's story, Father Robert Banzin, though most people in his community simply know him as Father Bob. He's in his 80s now, a retired priest from the Chicago area, but retirement doesn't mean much to Father Bob. He still preaches every Sunday at his parish.
Wow, still preaching every Sunday in his 80s? That's dedication. What can you tell us about his background?
Father Bob has essentially devoted his entire life to serving others. He's one of those people who truly lives his faith, you know. He's been a fixture in his Chicago area parish for decades. And even though he's technically retired, he just couldn't step away completely.
I can respect that. Some people are just born to serve, aren't they? Do you know anything about what kind of impact he's had on his community over the years?
From what I understand, he's touched countless lives. He's the kind of priest who remembers everyone's name, shows up when families are going through hard times, and has probably officiated hundreds of weddings, baptisms, and funerals over his career.
Oh, I love that. So he's really woven into the fabric of his community.
Absolutely. And one thing that stands out about Father Bob is that despite being in his 80s, he's not completely disconnected from technology. He uses email and online services like PayPal, which unfortunately made him vulnerable to this particular scam.
That's actually really impressive. I know plenty of people half his age who struggle with technology. Do you know if he lives alone? I'm wondering about his support system.
Yes, he does live alone, which is another factor that made him vulnerable. Many scammers specifically target seniors who live independently because there's no one there to provide a second opinion or question suspicious activities.
That makes me so sad. So here's this wonderful man who's spent decades helping others, living alone, still active in his community, and scammers just saw him as a target.
Unfortunately, that's exactly right. And what makes this story particularly heartbreaking is that Father Bob has always been known for his generosity. Former parishioners describe him as someone who would literally give you the shirt off his back if you needed it.
Ugh, that just makes this so much worse. Did he have much in savings? I mean, priests aren't exactly known for having huge retirement accounts, right?
That's true, Sue. Most priests live modestly, and Father Bob was no exception. But he had been careful with his finances throughout his life, building up what was for him a significant nest egg. It wasn't millions, but it represented his life's work and security for his final years. So, let's talk about how this whole thing started. Like many scams targeting seniors, this one began with a simple email that showed up in Father Bob's inbox one morning.
What did the email say?
The email appeared to be from PayPal and claimed that his account had been used to make a purchase on eBay. It was for something like $499 that he definitely hadn't bought.
Oh no, I know that would freak me out if I saw something like that. Did it look legitimate?
That's the thing. It looked incredibly convincing. These scammers have gotten sophisticated. The email had the PayPal logo, proper formatting, even all the fine print you'd expect at the bottom. It's not like the old days of emails full of typos and broken English.
Wow, that's scary. So what did the email ask him to do?
The email included a warning message saying something like, "If you did not authorize this transaction, please contact our customer service immediately," and then provided a phone number. That's the key part of the trap, giving a phone number rather than directing him to the actual PayPal website.
Oh, I get it. So instead of clicking a suspicious link, which many people now know to avoid, they're directing victims to make a phone call, which seems safer.
Exactly. Most people have been warned about clicking links, but a phone number feels different, more legitimate somehow. And for someone like Father Bob, who grew up in an era where phone calls were the primary way to resolve issues, it seemed like the natural thing to do.
That's so devious. Did the email have any other red flags that maybe Father Bob missed?
Well, if he had looked very closely at the sender's email address, he might have noticed it wasn't actually from PayPal.com. These scammers often use addresses like PayPal Security, mailservice.com, or something similar, close enough to look legitimate at a glance, but not actually from the real company.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't always check the full email address when I get what looks like an official email, especially if I'm alarmed about a potential unauthorized charge.
Most people don't, and that's exactly what these scammers are counting on. They're creating what psychologists call an amygdala hijack, basically triggering your brain's fear response so you react emotionally rather than logically.
Wait, so they're actually using our brain chemistry against us? That's terrifying and fascinating at the same time.
It really is. When you see a message saying your account has been compromised or that you've been charged for something you didn't buy, your first reaction is panic. And when we're panicking, we're not thinking clearly or checking email headers.
And I imagine they create a sense of urgency too, right? Like act now or else?
Absolutely. The email probably said something like, "This transaction will be finalized within 24 hours if no action is taken." That urgency is another key tactic. They don't want to give you time to think, to talk to someone else, or to do any research.
So Father Bob gets this official-looking email with the right logo, professional formatting, saying his PayPal account was used for a purchase he didn't make, and giving him a phone number to call right away to fix it. I can see why he fell for it. I mean, I probably would have done the same thing.
So Father Bob did exactly what most people would do in this situation. He called the number in the email, thinking he was contacting PayPal's legitimate customer service.
And I'm guessing that wasn't PayPal at all, right?
Not even close. He was connected to a scammer who had set up what we call a phishing operation. That's voice phishing. These operations can be surprisingly sophisticated.
Wait, so they have actual call centers for this? Like with multiple people answering phones?
In many cases, yes. Some of these scam operations run out of real call centers, often overseas, with dozens of trained operators whose sole job is to impersonate customer service representatives from companies like PayPal, Amazon, or major banks.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. What happened when Father Bob called?
The person who answered sounded completely professional. They greeted him with something like, "Thank you for calling PayPal Security Services. How can I help you today?" They probably even had hold music and automated menu options to make it seem legitimate.
That's crazy. How do people even know they're being scammed when it sounds so real?
That's exactly the problem. Father Bob had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. The representative asked him to confirm the email he received and expressed concern about the unauthorized purchase. They sounded helpful and concerned.
I'm guessing they then asked for his personal information?
They did, but in a very strategic way. They didn't immediately ask for his bank details. Instead, they built trust first by asking him to verify information they claimed to already have, like the last 4 digits of his social security number or his address.
Oh, that's clever. So it seems like they're confirming information rather than collecting it?
Exactly. And once they've established that trust, they started explaining how serious the situation was. The scammer told Father Bob that this wasn't just a simple, unauthorized purchase. It was evidence that his entire bank account had likely been compromised.
Oh no, that would make anyone panic.
Absolutely. And panic is exactly what they want. The fake representative probably said something like, "Sir, this is very concerning. Based on what we're seeing, your bank account appears to have been targeted by sophisticated hackers. We need to take immediate action to secure your funds."
Oh, that makes my stomach turn. So they're pretending to help while actually setting up the theft.
Precisely. What's particularly insidious about these phone scams is the human element. There's something about speaking to a seemingly concerned professional person that bypasses our usual skepticism. And scammers are trained in social engineering techniques to sound authoritative and trustworthy.
So what exactly do they say to convince someone to hand over their money?
They usually create a story about needing to move the victim's money to a secure account temporarily while the supposed security issue is resolved. The scammer might say, "For your protection, we need to transfer your funds to a secure holding account until we can verify that your regular account is safe again."
And people believe that's a real thing? A secure holding account?
When you're panicking about losing your life savings and a seemingly helpful expert is offering a solution, yes, many people do believe it. Remember, scammers are playing on emotion, not logic. They keep victims in a state of fear and urgency throughout the call.
I'm guessing they don't give you much time to think about it either.
No time at all. They emphasize that hackers are actively draining the account or that the situation will worsen with each passing minute. They might even fake conferencing in someone they claim is from the bank or even law enforcement to add legitimacy.
That's absolutely horrifying. Are there any red flags during these calls that people should watch out for?
Definitely. Legitimate companies will never pressure you to make immediate transfers or purchases. They won't ask for complete login credentials or passwords. And they certainly won't direct you to move money to a different account for safekeeping.
So what should someone do if they get a call like this, or if they called a number like Father Bob did?
Hang up immediately. If you're concerned about your account, call the official number on the back of your credit card or from the company's official website, not from an email or search result, or just log into your account directly to check for issues. So, after establishing trust with Father Bob, the scammers took their manipulation to the next level. They told him his bank account had been seriously compromised and created an elaborate story to convince him that his life savings were at immediate risk.
This is what I find so disturbing. They're literally preying on people's fears. How exactly did they convince a sharp, educated man like Father Bob that his bank account was in danger?
These scammers are experts at creating what psychologists call amygdala hijacking, basically triggering your brain's fear response so intensely that it overrides logical thinking. They told Father Bob that they detected suspicious login attempts from multiple foreign countries on his account.
Oh, wow. That would definitely freak me out. Did they make it sound really technical?
Absolutely. They use banking and cybersecurity jargon to sound legitimate, talking about encrypted security protocols and multi-factor authentication breaches. To someone who isn't in tech, it sounds convincing and overwhelming.
And I'm guessing they didn't give him time to process any of this information?
Not at all. That's a key tactic, creating artificial time pressure. They told Father Bob that hackers were actively accessing his accounts at that very moment, and that every minute he waited meant more money at risk. They might have said something like, "Sir, I'm looking at your account activity right now, and I can see unauthorized access attempts happening in real time."
That's so cruel. It's like they're creating this perfect storm of fear and urgency. What other psychological tricks do they use?
They're masters at creating what's called isolation. They'll often tell victims not to discuss the situation with anyone else, claiming that bank employees might be involved in the scheme or that talking to family members could compromise the investigation.
Wait, they actually tell people not to talk to their family or go to their bank in person? That's a huge red flag.
Huge red flag, yes. But when you're scared and trust has been established, these warnings seem legitimate. They told Father Bob something like, "For security reasons, don't discuss this with anyone at your local bank branch. We have reason to believe there may be internal compromise. We're working with federal authorities on this."
Oh my gosh. So they're basically cutting off all potential lifelines that might help the person realize it's a scam. How do they make their solutions sound legitimate?
They position themselves as the only safe option in a dangerous situation. The scammer likely told Father Bob they were initiating special protective measures only available through PayPal's security team. They create this narrative that they're the good guys fighting to protect his money.
And I'm assuming they use a lot of official sounding language and procedures.
Exactly. They provide confirmation numbers, case IDs, and create fake verification steps that make the whole process seem official. They might even create a sense of exclusivity, saying something like, "We're implementing our highest level of account protection, which is normally reserved for our premium clients, but given the severity of your situation..."
That's so manipulative. It makes the victim feel special while they're being robbed blind. Do they ever pretend to get supervisors or other authorities involved?
All the time. They'll put victims on hold to consult with the security team or bring in a specialist. Sometimes they'll even conference in a supposed supervisor or bank official who's just another scammer to add another layer of legitimacy.
That's terrifying. So what were they telling Father Bob to make him transfer his money?
They convinced him that his money needed to be transferred to a secure temporary account protected by advanced encryption while they resolved the security breach on his regular account. They framed it entirely as a protective measure being done for his benefit.
And I'm guessing once the money is transferred, that's it. It's gone?
Unfortunately, yes. The money gets moved through multiple accounts very quickly, often converting to cryptocurrency, making it nearly impossible to recover. In Father Bob's case, they didn't take everything at once. They strung him along over several weeks, which is another common tactic.
Why would they do it over weeks rather than all at once?
It's actually very calculated. By taking smaller amounts initially, they can test if the transfers work. It also helps avoid triggering fraud alerts from the bank. Then they build toward larger transfers once they've established a pattern. Plus, it gives them time to gain even more trust and information from the victim.
This level of manipulation is just, I'm speechless. What makes elderly people like Father Bob particularly vulnerable to these tactics?
Several factors. Many older adults were raised in an era where politeness and respect for authority were paramount, making it harder to just hang up on someone. They may also be less familiar with how digital banking security actually works, and sadly, scammers specifically target the elderly because they often have lifetime savings and retirement funds available.
It's just so heartbreaking. These people work their whole lives and then someone steals it all through psychological manipulation.
It really is. And what makes it even more painful is the shame victims often feel afterward. They blame themselves for falling for it, when in reality, these are sophisticated psychological attacks designed by professionals to overcome natural skepticism. Now let's talk about exactly how the scammers managed to clean out Father Bob's life savings. It wasn't a one-time theft. It was a calculated, gradual process that happened over several weeks.
So they didn't just take everything at once? That seems strange.
It's actually a deliberate strategy. They started with smaller transfers, maybe a few hundred or $1,000, to establish trust and test if their access worked. Once those initial transfers succeeded, without raising alarms, they gradually increased the amounts.
That's so calculated. Did Father Bob realize what was happening as these transfers were occurring?
No, because the scammers maintained regular contact with him throughout the process. They'd call with updates on the supposed investigation, reassure him his money was safe in the temporary secure account, and even provide fake balance statements showing his money was still there.
Oh no, that's horrible. So he thought everything was fine while they were actually draining his accounts.
Exactly. They likely used remote access software to gain control of his computer after convincing him to download it for security purposes. Once installed, they could see everything on his screen, including when he logged into his real bank accounts.
Wait, hold on. They could actually see his screen? How does that work?
They trick victims into installing legitimate remote support software like TeamViewer or AnyDesk, claiming it's needed for account verification or security monitoring. Once installed, they have complete access to everything on the computer. They can see whatever Father Bob sees, move his cursor, and even make transactions while he watches.
That's terrifying. So they could literally watch him type in passwords and everything?
Absolutely. They might even record his keystrokes to capture passwords. In some cases, they'll create a distraction on one part of the screen while making transfers in another window that the victim can't see. It's digital sleight of hand.
Oh, that makes me sick. How much did they end up taking from Father Bob in total?
According to the report, they managed to steal his entire life savings, likely tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. These scammers don't stop until the accounts are completely drained.
That's devastating. I mean, at his age, it's not like he can just go back to work and earn it all back. Technically speaking, where does the money actually go?
The money typically moves through a series of accounts, sometimes called money mules, which might be other scam victims or accomplices. Each transfer makes the money harder to trace. Eventually, they often convert the funds to cryptocurrency, which provides another layer of anonymity.
I've heard about cryptocurrency being used by criminals, but I don't really understand why it's so hard to track.
Well, while cryptocurrency transactions are recorded on a public ledger called a blockchain, the owners of the accounts aren't identified by name, just by a string of numbers and letters. So, without additional information, it's extremely difficult for authorities to know who controls which account. Once the money is converted to crypto, the scammers can move it globally with little trace.
Oh, wow. So by the time Father Bob realized what had happened, his money was basically untraceable?
Unfortunately, yes. The moment he realized he'd been scammed, which might have been when he couldn't reach the PayPal agents anymore, or when he noticed his real accounts were empty, it was already too late. The money had been moved through multiple channels, converted to different forms, and essentially vanished.
That's so awful. Did the scammers just disappear after getting all his money, or did they try to keep the scheme going somehow?
In many cases, once they've drained the primary accounts, they'll try to squeeze out even more. They might claim there's a recovery fee needed to get the money back, or they'll sell the victim's information to other scammers who use different approaches. It's not uncommon for victims to be targeted multiple times by different scam operations.
That's crazy. How do people fall for that? If someone just stole all your money, why would you send them more?
It sounds illogical from the outside, but these scammers are exploiting what psychologists call the sunk cost fallacy. Once victims have lost a large sum, they become desperate to recover it and more willing to take risks. It's similar to gambling. Losing makes some people double down rather than walk away.
I never thought of it that way. Did Father Bob fall for any secondary scams?
The report doesn't mention it, but fortunately, it sounds like he realized what was happening before getting pulled into additional scams. However, his financial institution couldn't recover the funds because he had authorized the transfers himself, even though he was deceived into doing so.
So the bank wouldn't help him? That seems unfair when he was clearly manipulated.
It's a major challenge with these scams. Unlike fraudulent credit card transactions, banks often don't reimburse for authorized wire transfers or Zelle payments, even if they were made under false pretenses. That's why prevention is so crucial. Once the money is gone, recovery options are extremely limited.
This is all so sophisticated. You'd need to be a technical expert to even understand how they're stealing from you. How are regular people supposed to protect themselves?
That's the troubling part. These scammers are continuously refining their techniques. But there are some consistent red flags we can talk about that might have helped Father Bob recognize what was happening before it was too late. Looking at Father Bob's experience, there were several clear warning signs that could have tipped him off that this was a scam. First and foremost was the unsolicited email claiming to be from PayPal about an unauthorized transaction.
But don't legitimate companies like PayPal send emails about suspicious activity? How can someone tell the difference?
That's a great question, Sue. Legitimate companies do send alerts, but there are subtle differences. Real PayPal emails will address you by your full name, not generic terms like Dear Customer or Dear User. Also, hovering over links without clicking will show the actual URL destination. Scam emails often show URLs that don't match the official company domain.
Oh, I never thought to check that. What about the phone number Father Bob called? Was there a red flag there?
Absolutely. One major red flag was that he found the phone number in the suspicious email itself. Legitimate companies typically don't embed support numbers in notification emails. Instead, you should manually navigate to the official website or check the back of your credit card for the correct number.
Wow, that's really good to know. What other warning signs did the scammers show during their interactions with Father Bob?
The pressure tactics were a huge red flag. The fake PayPal agents created an artificial sense of urgency, claiming his bank account was compromised and that he needed to act immediately to protect his money. Legitimate financial institutions never pressure you to make immediate money transfers or security decisions.
I've definitely experienced that feeling of panic when I get messages about my accounts. It's hard to think clearly when you're worried about losing money.
That's exactly what scammers count on. Another major red flag was their request to install remote access software. No legitimate financial institution will ever ask to take control of your computer or watch your screen. That's a 100% sign you're dealing with scammers.
That makes sense. What about the way they spoke to him? Were there any linguistic clues?
Great point. Scammers often have unusual speech patterns or grammatical errors, though some are becoming very polished. But the biggest linguistic red flag is the terminology they use, mentioning secure servers, verification protocols, or temporary holding accounts. These sound official but aren't terms that legitimate financial representatives typically use.
Oh no, I might have fallen for that. They sound so professional with all that technical jargon.
That's the intention, to sound authoritative. Another huge red flag was their instruction not to contact his actual bank or tell anyone about the situation. Legitimate companies never ask you to keep security matters secret from your financial institutions.
That's a great point. What about the multiple transfers over time? Shouldn't that have raised suspicions?
Absolutely. Any request to make unusual transfers, especially to accounts you don't recognize or to convert money to cryptocurrency, should immediately raise alarm bells. Legitimate fraud investigations never involve transferring your money to secure or temporary accounts.
Okay, so what should Father Bob have done when he first got that email? What's the right response?
The safest approach is to never click links in suspicious emails. Instead, open a new browser window and manually type in the company's official website. Then log into your account directly to check for any notifications or issues. For PayPal specifically, log in at paypal.com and check your account activity or messages.
And I'm guessing you should never call phone numbers from suspicious emails, right?
Exactly. Always use contact information from the official website, your account statements, or the back of your credit card. And if someone claiming to be from a company calls you, hang up and call back using the official number to verify it's legitimate.
What if someone has already shared some information before realizing it might be a scam?
That's when immediate action is crucial. If you've shared account information, change your passwords immediately from a different device. Call your financial institutions directly using the numbers on your cards or statements, not numbers provided by the potential scammers. Report the incident and ask about placing freezes or fraud alerts on your accounts.
These scammers are so sophisticated. I'm wondering, are there any emotional red flags people should watch for in themselves?
That's such an important question, Sue. Yes, feeling rushed, fearful, or pressured is a huge internal warning sign. If you feel panicked or that you must act immediately without time to think, that's your cue to step back and verify what's happening through official channels.
I love that advice. So basically, take a breath and slow down if someone's rushing you to make financial decisions.
Exactly. Remember, no legitimate financial emergency requires you to make instant transfers without verification. Even in genuine fraud cases, taking a few minutes to independently verify the situation won't make a difference in the outcome, but it could save you from a devastating scam.
It seems like awareness of these red flags could have saved Father Bob from losing his life savings. Are there any other warning signs our listeners should know about?
One more crucial red flag is when someone asks for payment or transfers through unusual methods, wire transfers, gift cards, cryptocurrency, or money transfer apps. Legitimate fraud departments never ask for payments to resolve security issues. Let's talk about how legitimate companies like PayPal actually handle security concerns, because it's vastly different from what these scammers were doing to Father Bob.
I think that would be really helpful. What would an actual communication from PayPal look like if there really was suspicious activity?
First off, PayPal will never send you an unexpected email with a phone number to call. Their legitimate security alerts will direct you to log into your account directly through the PayPal website or app to review the issue. They'll never create that sense of panic that scammers rely on.
So they don't call you out of the blue telling you your account's been compromised?
Exactly. PayPal typically communicates through their secure messaging system within your account. If they do send an email, it will address you by your full name, not "Dear Customer," and will ask you to log into your account independently, not by clicking a link in the email.
What about verification? How does PayPal actually verify it's you when there's a real security concern?
Great question. Legitimate PayPal will never ask for your full password over the phone. They might use multi-factor authentication, sending a temporary code to your verified phone number or email. but they will never, under any circumstances, ask you to install remote access software or watch you use your computer.
Oh, that's a huge difference from what happened to Father Bob.
Absolutely. Another critical difference is that PayPal will never ask you to move your money to a safe or secure account, even temporarily. That's simply not how they operate. If there's a suspicious transaction, they'll investigate it while your money stays where it is.
What about their verification questions? Do they ask for things like social security numbers or complete bank account details?
No, they don't. PayPal may ask you to confirm some account information to verify your identity, but they'll never ask for your full social security number, complete bank account numbers, or your full credit card information over the phone. They already have that information in their secure systems.
That makes so much sense. What if someone really does need to speak to a PayPal representative? What's the proper way to do that?
If you need to speak with PayPal directly, go to their official website. That's paypal.com, and look for their contact information there. Or use their app. Don't Google search PayPal customer service, because scammers often pay to have their fake numbers appear at the top of search results.
Wow, they even manipulate search results? That's disturbing.
Unfortunately, yes. Another important distinction is that legitimate PayPal representatives will never rush you or create artificial urgency. They understand that account security is important and will give you time to properly verify and address issues.
I'm curious, how does PayPal handle actual fraud cases when they do occur?
When PayPal detects actual suspicious activity, they might temporarily limit certain account functions, but they explain clearly why this is happening. They provide a specific process through your account dashboard to verify information and restore full access. They never tell you to keep the situation secret or warn you against talking to your bank.
Do they ever ask customers to make test transactions like the scammers did with Father Bob?
Never. PayPal doesn't need you to make test transactions to verify your account. That's purely a scammer tactic to get access to your money. Real PayPal has sophisticated security systems that don't require you to send money anywhere to prove your identity.
What about their customer service approach in general? How can you tell if you're dealing with actual PayPal?
Legitimate PayPal representatives will be patient, professional, and most importantly, they won't pressure you. They'll be happy to explain their security measures and provide verification that you're speaking with the real company. They'll also have detailed knowledge of your recent account activity without you having to provide it.
That's really helpful information. So, in Father Bob's case, what would have been the correct response if he was concerned about that initial email?
The safest approach would have been to completely ignore the email and independently log into his PayPal account through the official website or app. From there, he could check his recent transactions and account notifications to see if there really was an issue. If he was still concerned, he could contact PayPal using the contact information provided within his logged-in account, not from the email.
It really comes down to being proactive rather than reactive, doesn't it?
Exactly. Taking those few extra seconds to verify through official channels can make all the difference between security and becoming a victim of fraud. It's about taking back control of the situation instead of responding from a place of fear, which is exactly what scammers want you to do. Now, after everything Father Bob went through, there was actually a silver lining to this devastating situation. His community really stepped up in an incredible way.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. What happened after people learned about the scam?
Well, once word got out that Father Bob had lost his life savings, there was this amazing groundswell of support. Former students, parishioners, and community members who had been touched by his decades of service immediately began organizing to help him.
That's beautiful. I mean, after devoting his entire life to serving others, it seems fitting that others would want to give back to him.
Absolutely. They set up a GoFundMe campaign that spread quickly through the parish network and beyond. What started as a small effort among his close circle ended up reaching thousands of people, many who had been married by Father Bob or whose children he had baptized over his years of service.
Wow, how much were they able to raise?
They managed to recover a significant portion of what he lost. The campaign ultimately raised over $65,000, which didn't replace everything, but it gave him enough financial stability to continue his modest lifestyle and keep serving his community.
That's incredible. I imagine the emotional impact of seeing that support must have been just as important as the financial help.
That's exactly right. When I spoke with some of the organizers, they said Father Bob was completely overwhelmed. At first, he was reluctant to accept help because he'd always been the one providing support to others. The whole experience was humbling for him.
I can only imagine. Did he share how he felt about all this support?
He did. He told his congregation that while the scam had shaken his trust in humanity, the response completely restored it. He said something really powerful, that sometimes we need to experience darkness to truly appreciate light.
That's profound. Did this experience change how he approaches his ministry?
It actually gave him a new dimension to his work. He now incorporates warnings about scams into his community outreach, especially focused on protecting elderly parishioners. He's turned his painful experience into a teaching opportunity.
That's turning lemons into lemonade for sure. I'm curious, though. How did this affect him emotionally during those initial weeks after discovering the scam?
There was definitely a period of deep depression. One of his close friends told me Father Bob struggled with feelings of foolishness and shame. At his age, losing your life savings is traumatic. It's not like you have years to rebuild. He questioned how he could have fallen for something like this.
That breaks my heart. Did he blame himself?
Initially, yes. What's particularly cruel about these scams is they leave victims feeling responsible, which compounds the trauma. But the community response helped shift that narrative. People kept reminding him that these are sophisticated criminal enterprises designed to manipulate even the most careful people.
I think that's so important for anyone listening who might have been scammed. It's not about intelligence or awareness. These scammers are professionals who exploit human psychology.
Exactly. And the community response to Father Bob helps illustrate something important. While scam victims often feel isolated by shame, sharing what happened can actually connect them with support they never knew was available.
Did any other organizations step in to help him?
Yes, the local Catholic diocese provided some emergency assistance, and a legal aid organization that specializes in elder fraud took on his case pro bono. They're still working to track down some of the stolen funds, though that's unfortunately a long shot in these types of scams.
What about his banking institution? Were they able to help at all?
Unfortunately, because he had authorized the transactions himself, even though it was under false pretenses, the bank's hands were largely tied. They did waive some fees and helped him secure his new accounts with additional protections. This is why prevention is so crucial with these scams.
Has the experience changed how his community views technology and online security?
Absolutely. His parish actually organized several digital literacy workshops specifically geared towards seniors after this happened. They brought in cybersecurity experts to give practical advice. Father Bob's experience became a powerful teaching moment for the entire community.
That's turning something terrible into something positive for others. Do you think his willingness to share his story publicly helped other people avoid similar scams?
Without question. Several people have come forward saying they received similar PayPal scam emails, but remembered Father Bob's story and knew exactly what to do. His openness potentially saved others from the same fate.
That really shows how powerful sharing these stories can be. It must take courage to admit publicly that you've been scammed.
It absolutely does. And that's why I always emphasize to scam victims that speaking up isn't just about their own healing. It's an act of service that protects others. Father Bob understood that instinctively because service has always been central to his life. Father Bob's story is unfortunately just one variation in a whole ecosystem of imposter scams. What happened to him follows a pattern we're seeing more and more frequently.
So this PayPal scam isn't unique? There are other scams that follow the same basic structure?
Exactly. The PayPal imposter scam is just one flavor in what we call business impersonation scams. We're seeing nearly identical tactics with fake communications claiming to be from Amazon, Netflix, Apple, Microsoft, your bank, and pretty much any major company you can think of.
Oh, wow, that's concerning. What are some of the common elements across these different scams?
They all start with that initial hook, an alarming message about your account. It could be an unauthorized purchase, a security breach, or a subscription renewal you didn't authorize. The key is creating that immediate panic reaction.
Right, that feeling of, oh no, someone's using my account, or I'm about to be charged for something I didn't buy.
Exactly. Then they all follow a similar playbook. They provide a phone number that seems legitimate, but actually connects to the scammers. Once you call, they create an escalating sense of danger. Your accounts are compromised, your identity is stolen, or your computer is hacked.
And I'm guessing they all use that same psychological trick of positioning themselves as the solution to the problem they've invented?
Absolutely. It's really insidious. They first create fear, then position themselves as your savior. The scammer might pose as a security specialist or fraud department agent who's going to help protect your money.
I'm curious about something. Why do these scammers almost always push people toward phone conversations instead of just handling everything by email?
That's a great question, Sue. Voice communication gives scammers significant advantages. First, it's immediate. They don't give you time to think or consult others. Second, human voices create trust in ways text can't. And third, over the phone, they can adapt their script in real time based on your responses.
I never thought about it that way. I guess it's also harder to look back at a phone conversation versus an email that you could scrutinize later for red flags.
That's right. Plus, their scripts include responses to common objections. If you express doubt, they have pre-planned ways to reinforce your trust. They might transfer you to a supervisor who's actually just another scammer in the same room.
That's so manipulative. Are there any variations in these scams people should know about?
Definitely. One growing variation is the refund scam. They claim you're eligible for a refund from a service you supposedly canceled. When you go to claim it, they pretend to accidentally transfer too much money to your account and pressure you to return the difference.
Wait, but they haven't actually sent any money, right?
Exactly. They manipulate your online banking display through remote access or ask you to check specific transactions that appear legitimate. In reality, they're just shuffling your own money between accounts to make it look like they've deposited something.
Oh my gosh, that's so elaborate. Why are these scams becoming so prevalent now?
Several reasons. First, our digital lives are increasingly complex. Most people have dozens of online accounts and subscriptions, making it hard to track everything. Second, data breaches have made our personal information widely available to criminals. And third, the pandemic accelerated online commerce, creating more opportunities for scammers.
I'm also wondering if it has to do with how convincing these fake emails and websites have become.
You've hit on something important there. The technical sophistication has increased dramatically. Scammers now create perfect replicas of legitimate company emails, complete with proper logos, formatting, and even sender addresses that appear legitimate at first glance.
That's terrifying. Are there specific demographics these scammers tend to target more than others?
While they'll target anyone, they often focus on seniors for several reasons. Many older adults didn't grow up with this technology, so they may be less familiar with security best practices. They also tend to have accumulated more wealth over their lifetimes, making them more lucrative targets.
And I imagine there's also an element of isolation for some seniors that might make them more vulnerable.
That's a perceptive point, Sue. Social isolation can definitely increase vulnerability. People who don't have others to consult might be more likely to trust an authoritative sounding voice on the phone. It's why scam prevention is partly about building support networks.
This all seems so overwhelming. Are these scammers ever caught?
Unfortunately, the catch rate is low. These operations are often based overseas, using sophisticated methods to mask their locations and identities. Money typically moves through multiple accounts rapidly, making recovery very difficult once it's gone. Let's talk about how to protect yourself from these types of scams. The good news is that there are concrete steps everyone can take to significantly reduce their risk.
That would be so helpful. What's the number one thing people should remember when they get a concerning email or text about one of their accounts?
The golden rule is never click links or call phone numbers provided in unexpected emails or texts. Instead, go directly to the official website by typing the address yourself or use the company's official app. If you're concerned about your PayPal account, log in directly at paypal.com, not through any link someone sent you.
That makes sense. But what if the email looks completely legitimate? I mean, these scammers are getting really good at copying real company emails.
You're absolutely right. And that's why you should treat all unexpected communications with healthy skepticism. Remember that legitimate companies like PayPal, Amazon, or your bank will never call you out of the blue asking for passwords, requesting remote access to your computer, or pressuring you to transfer money.
What about those situations where you need to call customer service? How can you be sure you're reaching the real company?
Great question. Always get the customer service number from the company's official website, your account statement, or the back of your credit card, never from an email, text, or search result. Scammers are actually purchasing ads on search engines that make their fake numbers appear at the top of search results.
Wait, really? So if I Google PayPal customer service number, I might get a scammer's number.
Unfortunately, yes. That's becoming increasingly common. Scammers pay for those top ad positions knowing people trust search results.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. What about password security? I feel like that's something a lot of us could improve on.
Absolutely. Use unique, strong passwords for each account, especially financial accounts. A password manager can help you create and store these securely, and always enable two-factor authentication when available. It's like adding a second lock to your door.
What exactly is two-factor authentication? I've heard that term, but I'm not sure everyone understands it.
Two-factor authentication means you need two different things to log in, something you know, your password, and something you have, like your phone. After entering your password, you'll receive a temporary code via text or an authentication app that you also need to enter. It's much more secure, because even if a scammer somehow gets your password, they still can't access your account without that second factor.
That's really helpful. What about monitoring our accounts? How often should we be checking them?
I recommend reviewing all financial accounts weekly, if possible. Look for unfamiliar transactions, even small ones. Scammers often test accounts with tiny charges before attempting larger fraud. Many banks and credit cards also offer automatic alerts for transactions over a certain amount. Set those up.
I have those alerts on my phone and they're so useful. What about those credit freezes I've heard about? Are those a good idea?
Credit freezes are excellent protection. They prevent anyone, including scammers, from opening new accounts in your name. You can still use your existing credit cards normally, but no one can open new lines of credit without you temporarily lifting the freeze. It's one of the strongest protections against identity theft.
How do you actually set up a credit freeze?
You need to contact each of the 3 major credit bureaus individually: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. The process is free and can usually be done online. Just remember that you'll need to temporarily lift the freeze if you legitimately apply for new credit.
That's really good to know. What about those moments when someone is pressuring you to act quickly? I feel like that's when people make mistakes.
You've identified one of the biggest red flags: urgency. Legitimate companies don't create artificial time pressure. If someone is rushing you to make decisions about your money or personal information, that's a major warning sign. Always take the time to think, research, and consult with trusted friends or family before taking action.
That's such a good point. I think sometimes people feel embarrassed to ask for a second opinion.
Exactly, and scammers count on that. They want to isolate you and prevent you from getting outside perspective. That's why I always tell people to create a scam buddy, someone you agree to consult before making financial decisions or sharing sensitive information.
I love that idea. What about older adults like Father Bob who might be especially vulnerable?
Family members should have regular, non-judgmental conversations with older loved ones about scams. Consider setting up account alerts so trusted family members are notified of large transactions. And most banks now offer view-only access for trusted contacts who can help monitor for suspicious activity without having the ability to move money.
That's really practical advice. Are there any signs that someone might already be involved with a scammer?
Watch for changes in behavior like unusual secrecy about finances, sudden money problems, or expressions of fear about computer security. If someone mentions helping a financial institution catch hackers or moving money for safekeeping, those are serious red flags that require immediate intervention.
This is also helpful, Nick. Any final thoughts on protecting ourselves?
Remember that legitimate businesses will never ask you to purchase gift cards, send cryptocurrency, or wire money under urgent circumstances. And if you ever feel pressured or uncertain during a call, hang up immediately. You can always call back through official channels if it was legitimate. Now that we've covered protection strategies, let's talk about what to do if you've already been targeted or fallen victim to a scam. Reporting these scams is crucial, not just for your own potential recovery, but to help authorities track and stop these criminals.
So if someone realizes they've been scammed, what's the very first thing they should do?
The moment you realize you've been scammed, time is critical. First, contact your financial institutions immediately. Call the number on the back of your credit card or bank statement to report unauthorized transactions and request fraud protection measures.
And I imagine they should change their passwords right away too?
Absolutely. Change passwords for all your accounts, starting with your email and financial accounts. Use a secure device that hasn't been compromised by the scammer. If the scammers had remote access to your computer, you might want to have it professionally checked or reset.
What about reporting to official agencies? Who handles these kinds of scams?
There are several important places to report. Start with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center at ic3.gov. Also report to the Federal Trade Commission at reportfraud.ftc.gov. If it's identity theft, visit identitytheft.gov for a personalized recovery plan.
Those are great resources. Should people also file a police report?
Yes, filing a report with your local police department creates an official record of the crime. While local police may not be able to investigate international scams, this report can be essential for disputing fraudulent charges and working with your financial institutions.
What are the chances of actually recovering money that's been stolen? I imagine it must be difficult, especially in cases like Father Bob's.
I won't sugarcoat it. Recovery can be challenging, particularly if money was wired or sent via cryptocurrency. However, if unauthorized transfers were made from your bank or credit cards, reporting quickly can improve your chances. Many financial institutions have fraud protection policies that may cover some losses if reported promptly.
How quickly do people need to report to have the best chance of recovery?
The sooner the better. Most banks require fraud reporting within 60 days of the statement date, but realistically, reporting within 24-48 hours gives you the best chance. After funds have been transferred internationally or converted to cryptocurrency, recovery becomes much more difficult.
Oh, wow, that's a really tight window. What about PayPal specifically? Do they have any special fraud protection?
PayPal does offer buyer protection for certain unauthorized transactions, but you typically need to report within 180 days. The important thing to understand is that PayPal's protection mainly covers purchases, not direct money transfers or scams, where you authorize the payment under false pretenses.
That's an important distinction. What if someone is too embarrassed to report that they've been scammed? I feel like that happens a lot.
You're right, and it's one of the biggest barriers to reporting. Many victims feel shame or embarrassment, but it's crucial to understand that these scammers are sophisticated criminals who have perfected psychological manipulation techniques. Anyone can become a victim.
Even smart, careful people, right?
Exactly. These scams can happen to anyone regardless of age, education, or technical savvy. Reporting not only helps your own case, but provides valuable intelligence to law enforcement about how these scams operate.
What about those scam callback services where you can have someone else intercept scam calls and waste the scammer's time? Are those helpful?
While those services can be satisfying, your first priority should always be official reporting channels. That said, there are legitimate services like the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline that can provide guidance on reporting and recovery steps.
Is there any way to check if your information is being shared among scammers? I've heard they sometimes have lists of potential victims.
Unfortunately, scammers do trade sucker lists of people who have fallen for scams before. You can check if your email has been involved in known data breaches on several online sites. If you've been victimized once, be especially vigilant, as repeat targeting is common.
That's really concerning. What should someone do if they get those follow-up scam attempts?
Be extremely cautious about anyone who contacts you claiming they can help recover lost money, especially if they request upfront fees. These recovery scams target previous victims and can cause additional losses. Only work with legitimate agencies or legal professionals you've independently verified.
So basically, there are scammers who scam people who've already been scammed? That's just cruel.
It is incredibly predatory. They know victims are vulnerable and desperate to recover their losses. That's why reporting through official channels is so important. They can guide you through legitimate recovery options without causing further harm. Well, Sue, we've covered a lot of ground today about the PayPal imposter scam that targeted Father Bob and how these types of scams operate more broadly.
I think what stands out to me most is how these scammers combine technological deception with psychological manipulation. That email looked legitimate. The phone number seemed real, and then they created this false urgency that overwhelmed Father Bob's usual caution.
Exactly. These scammers are counting on that panic response to override our rational thinking. The key takeaways for our listeners are, first, legitimate companies like PayPal will never call you out of the blue demanding immediate action.
And they certainly won't ask for remote access to your computer or tell you to transfer money to some safe account, right?
Absolutely not. Second, always verify independently by going directly to the company's official website or app. Never click links in suspicious emails or call numbers provided in those messages.
I think Father Bob's story also reminds us that these scammers target everyone, regardless of age, education, or background. Even someone as wise as Father Bob could be caught off guard.
That's so true. And finally, if you suspect you've been targeted, report it immediately. Time really is of the essence when it comes to potentially recovering funds.
And remember that there's no shame in asking for help. The community response to Father Bob's situation shows how much people care and want to help when something like this happens.
That's all for today's episode of Behind the Scams. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
And remember, stay safe, stay informed, stay alert, and we'll catch you next time. Miles, will you please close this episode in that velvet voice of yours?
And that's a wrap on another unbelievable case of modern-day fraud. Big thanks to Nick and Sue for breaking down how these PayPal imposters scammed an 80-something-year-old priest. You'd think even scammers would draw the line somewhere. But apparently their moral compass is as broken as their grammar. No real company will ever demand gift cards, wire transfers, or pressure you into panicking over urgent account issues. If someone tries it, hang up, log out, and walk away. Or better yet, report them and help take these scammers off the playing field. If you liked what you heard today, and I know you did, make sure to follow Behind the Scams on your favorite podcast platform. We are available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, and just about anywhere else you get podcasts. We've got more eye-opening, jaw-dropping scam stories headed your way. Also, be sure and visit us at stampoutscams.org to get scam prevention resources, or to support our mission to stop these digital desperados. Remember, we are a non-profit organization, so any donations you make through our website are tax-deductible.